Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. This is a webinar to discuss the ARC-EX. This is a therapy that got de novo classification and market authorization back in December 19th of 2024. And this is a therapy that is non-invasive that's inducing spinal cord stimulation for individuals with chronic spinal cord injury. And we're very excited to host this event to provide education and more information around this watershed moment. I want to first give just some housekeeping notes, and you can, I think, see them also in the webinar chat. To get more resources and more information, you can go to Onward Medical's website. There's also for more inquiries or questions, because I think we have reached capacity for this webinar and reached up to about 1,000 individuals. So that would make it very difficult for us to be able to take live questions. You can, for any inquiries, go to the survey that is there on the chat that will go to Onward. And also, please follow Onward's social media. And also to note that Onward Medical will be attending the Christopher and Dana Reeve Summit that is happening March 10th to the 12th in Denver, Colorado. So this is all very exciting news. Next slide, please. So my name's Marco Baptista. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I'll be the moderator of today's event. We have a very distinguished panel today that will be addressing a lot of the questions that we've been receiving around ARC-EX. We have here Dave Marver, who's the CEO of Onward Medical, Erika Ross Ellison, who's the VP of Clinical Quality and Regulatory for Onward Medical, Candace Tefertiller, who is the Uplift investigator, Uplift being the pivotal trial for the ARC-EX therapy, and the Lift Home principal investigator at Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado. We have Chet, Moritz, Uplift principal investigator also, professor of electrical and computer engineering, rehabilitation medicine, and physiology and biophysics departments at the University of Washington. And we have Sherown Campbell, an Uplift trial participant, and Jessie Owen, an ARC-EX therapy trial participant. And at the end of this webinar, we'll have 3 sections to discuss the personal experiences with ARC-EX, to discuss the science and evidence around ARC-EX, and finally to talk about access and availability, which I know is something that is very much on the forefront of everyone's minds. And with that, before we start, there'll be a short video to talk about some of the personal experience with ARC-EX, and we'll move to that right now.
Greatest unmet need for people with spinal cord injury is restoring hand and arm function. ARC-EX has the potential to restore that hand function or restore that independence. They don't need a caregiver to come and dress them and brush their teeth and feed them every day.
More function in someone who has very little function is incredibly meaningful. For me, it was the difference between living with a friend and living with about maybe 18 hours of caregiving a week to moving out and buying my own house and having about 6 hours of caregiving a week.
What we've seen with the ARC-EX device is that stimulating, we always start at least a year after injury. We still see that recovery where the ARC-EX device enables people to continue to recover their hand function.
When we talk about, 10% more function, we think about how important that is in terms of being able to live a life. What we don't always attach that to is the happiness it can really bring someone with limited mobility. I gained more function than I anticipated.
The ARC-EX device is revolutionary because for the first time, it allows people who've had a spinal cord injury to regain some function of their hands and to continue to improve as they practice using their hands.
Well, thank you, Marco, very much. And I am very pleased to introduce this moment that I know this community has long awaited. The introduction of this device, ARC-EX, which is the first system FDA approved for non-invasive spinal cord stimulation for people with SCI. And I'm holding one here as well. So you can see it's not just a picture, it's a real life device that's now approved and working and delivering important therapy. Next slide, Rob. The first indication for this device, and we do believe this device has versatility. It may be able to address other things in the future, but the first approved indication is indeed improving or restoring hand strength and sensation. You might see some small print here that details the formal indication statement from FDA. My colleague Erika is going to go into more detail about that on a future slide, so you don't have to worry about that. But for now, hand sensation and strength is the initial indication. Next slide. And this is the overview of the system. So you see the stimulator there in the middle of the screen. This connects to we call it a splitter box, but it's a way to organize the cables. This can be clipped to your clothing. You may have seen this in the video. Jessie was wearing one of these. And there are two sets of electrodes that come out of that splitter box. The active electrodes, those that deliver the therapy itself, the stimulation itself, those are placed on the skin in the neck area because it's the cervical spinal cord that controls or gives instructions to the hands and arms. And then at the right, you see this tablet programmer. We call this app the ARC-EX Pro. And this is what's used to develop an individual's customized programming parameters. And indeed, the therapy can be customized for everyone to optimize it for your recovery. The system is designed to be used in conjunction with functional task practice. And now I'd like to introduce Chet Moritz to describe FTP or functional task practice, as well as to detail some of the study results.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave, and welcome everyone. It's great to have so much excitement around this moment. This FDA approval means a lot, and it means a lot especially because of the function we've seen restored for people with spinal cord injury using the ARC-EX device. A lot of that function comes from doing intensive physical therapy, intensive occupational therapy while the stimulation is being delivered. And what we've seen is one of the best ways to do that is with this functional task practice paradigm that was developed by my co-PI in this trial, Adelfield Fote. And you'll see here an example of 5 different groups of activities, including finger isolation, pinch, more complex pinch, and 2 types of grasp that can really help to access the most key movements of the hands and arms that are needed in daily life. And so we certainly recommend always using the ARC-EX device in conjunction with a rigorous therapy program such as functional task practice. We can go ahead to the next slide. So we're also pleased to summarize the results of the pivotal trial that led to this FDA approval. Those results were published in May in the journal Nature Medicine. And as we go on to the next slide, we'll just see the highlights of those results, but you're all welcome to review the paper. It's freely available on the Nature website. What we found in this trial, and I think this is extremely exciting for any trial working with people with spinal cord injury, is a very high responder rate. We worked with 65 people in the trial, 60% or 60 of those people completed the trial, and 90% of those people improved in at least a measure of strength or a measure of function. And I think that's an incredibly high responder rate. Very similar, 87% of people reported improved quality of life. And we could detect no difference in the response rate based on someone's time after injury. We didn't recruit anyone before 1 year, so all of these participants had a chronic or long-term spinal cord injury, and some people had had that injury for up to 34 years when they enrolled in the trial. It's important to note we saw no serious device-related adverse events in this study that was conducted across 14 sites around the world in North America and Europe. And also,
although they weren't our primary outcomes, we noticed very exciting improvements for some people who reported reduced spasm frequency, better sleep, and I think critically improved sensation throughout their body below the injury, and also an improved sense of touch. Although it wasn't our primary outcome, actually one of our most exciting and unexpected findings in the study. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. Just want to talk, we'll see a short video here that shows for a different study participant at one of our sites how this therapy can have sometimes immediate effects. Sometimes it takes several therapy sessions to see an effect, and sometimes you see an immediate effect. So this participant, and his name is John, he's okay if we share that. He could move his arm, but you can see his hands were not strong enough to lift even the lightest weight hollow ping pong balls here, these orange plastic balls. They would slip from his grip when he tried to place them in the yellow bucket. But at the first experience with stimulation, just minutes after the stimulator was turned on, you can see he can easily grasp, transport, and release those balls. And that function continued to progress as he had more days of therapy with ARC-EX. Go to the next slide when you're ready. I just want to briefly review who is a candidate for the FDA-approved indications. It is, as Dave mentioned at the beginning, indicated to improve hand sensation. It was our biggest finding, as well as hand strength for people with chronic injury to the neck region or cervical region of their spinal cord. That includes anything from cervical level 2, what we call C2, through C8, and including all those levels. People who are adults, ages 18 to 75, fall under this FDA clearance. People who have a chronic spinal cord injury, so spinal cord injury for some period of time, and that spinal cord injury is non-progressive, so not resulting from a neurodegenerative condition, for example. And it includes most people with spinal cord injury. The majority of people have what we call American Spinal Injury Association, or ASIA, impairment scales, AIS, grades B, C, or D, and this clearance covers all of those levels. The system is contraindicated for people who have active implantable electronics, such as a pacemaker, a backlift and pump, or a deep brain stimulator. So we would want to be cautious to not use the stimulator with active electronics. And I believe at this point, I will hand it off to, who's next? I think Marco. I think we're going back to Marco.
Thanks, Chet. Thank you. So just a reminder before we get into our panel discussions of the Reeve Summit, where Onward Medical will be attending and presenting March 10th to the 12th in Denver, Colorado. And again, if you need more information or you want to be asking any other questions, these are links that you have to be able to connect with Onward Medical, including all of their social media. Great. And I think with that, maybe we can see all of the panelists and have our panel discussion, which I think is going to cover a lot of the questions that people have been asking. We're going to start our first section with the personal experience, so with Jessie and Sherown. Maybe we could start with you, Jessie, just if you could tell us briefly about your personal journey and how you got access to the ARC-EX, and then we'll pass it over to Sherown also.
Sure. I'm now 12 years removed from my accident. A tree fell on my family's car and it broke my neck at C3 and obviously changed my life forever. In the hospital, I was able to progress from a chin-driven wheelchair to hand drive, but not much more than that. I functioned maybe around a C4 level due to central cord syndrome. So I had and have a little bit more lower body movement, but very frustrating upper body mobility. And so I am lucky enough to live near the University of Washington, and there is a organization here called the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System, which shares information about our community here. And I heard about this trial. And so I went and I was curious as to whether I might be a good candidate. But I went into it. I understood that spinal cord injury research historically offers few reliable treatments with proven results for chronic injuries. So I approached the trial with A mindset of skepticism, but I felt compelled to participate to be part of something bigger. And now we are here.
Thank you, Jessie, for sharing. And Sherown, yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about your personal experience with ARC-EX and how you got access.
Yes, my name is Sherown Campbell. I'm a C4, C5 incomplete injury. I'm 11 years post-injury, and I usually try to stay on top of just different research and study coming up. I'm here in Colorado. We have Craig Hospital, which is really close. So anytime they reach out about studies and research going on, I either try to learn about it or participate if I'm able to. Hearing about the Uplift trial and onward at the point in time, it seemed almost like a perfect fit for me. I've been able and fortunate enough to regain quite a bit of mobility. So it being a non-invasive uh, type of therapy and something that wasn't surgical, low risk, was really interesting to me. And then also including the intensive therapy. I've had a lot of my success regaining motion and movement through locomotor training, high intensive training, just trying to build on top of what I have year after year. So the combination of that with this device, I was really excited about. And thankfully, I was able to see changes over those 12 weeks. Unfortunately, it ended at 12 weeks. So having it here now, FDA approved, is exciting news. And I can't wait to see what more they can apply it to. Because like I said, I have lower mobility and upper mobility. So I know this device could be utilized for so much more than just what we've seen so far.
Thank you for sharing. And maybe, Sherown, we could stay with you, and if there are any other personal benefits that you got from ARC-EX and also any downsides to using the therapy.
Yes, I was able to feel the stimulation and get some movement in my trunk, lower limbs, leg strength. It smoothed out some of my spasms. Initially, I had increased spasms, which for me, that's usually a prerequisite to return movement. I'll get kind of nerve pain, then spastic responses, then I get return of function just anytime I've gotten movement back. I did get increased sweating, which was really exciting for me because that meant that I had more access to temperature control instead of overheating or going into AD responses. Some sensation benefits. I did notice the blood pressure benefits going in and out of therapy. That wasn't a huge concern for me since I'm more mobile, but I do know just from taking blood pressures in and out of therapy that there was a benefit there.
Thank you, Sherown. Jessie?
Yeah. So I often, or I also had some of those same things. The the thing with a lot of the progress here is sometimes it's small and minimal. So I put a little bit of thought into my before and after, and I can do things now like put on the magnetic clasp on my Apple Watch. I can pick up toys off the ground. I can reposition myself in my wheelchair more comfortably and with greater ease. I can cut food. I can fasten buttons with the button tool now. Um, I can give better hugs now because my movement is bigger and more open. I have less tone. I started painting, and when I get assigned paperwork, like we all do at doctor's offices and I don't know, anywhere else, Costco, I can sign my own paperwork now. I can hold hands. I can drink from a water bottle or a glass without a straw. And I would say there's also less fatigue when engaging in all of these tasks because they require just a little bit less effort. On a clinical side, I went into this trial taking baclofen. And I no longer take any baclofen. I still have a little bit of tone, but it can be managed without medication for me now.
Well, my next question was going to be how has this changed your life? But I think that's very, very clear, and I appreciate you sharing that. Sherown, how has this changed your life?
It's allowed me to build on top of what was going well. Um, so I mean, I would say I definitely saw improvements at home, in the kitchen, those day-to-day functions. Sometimes they're not the most exciting things, but seeing those fine motor skills, the dexterity changes, these are things that are extremely hard for me to work on at home, especially the dexterity movement. Having used things like muscular electronic stimulation in the past, the hands, forearms, these are areas that are very difficult to stim and get any type of like muscle contraction from, especially in like in a coordinated movement. So being able to work on those tasks through therapy, I did see the benefits and I could tell the difference just like grasping a steering wheel, opening things, tying balloons, writing things at home. I haven't been able to retain as much of that function as I would have wished, and that's kind of to my own fault just because the larger movements, the gross motor skills, the grasp, the pinching, I tend to use those functions more often, whereas the small finger movements, fine motor skills, and dexterity, I tend to compensate and not stay on top of at home on my own as much. So there's definitely a combination of there of staying on top of the work and doing things that we want to work on, and then also utilizing the device. So we always have to keep those two things in conjunction. And again, that's probably one of the things that I liked most about this study and this device is it's a return of function. It's directly related to what we're doing, what we're working on, our body movement. You know, it's not a medication or just device on thing. It's directly related to return of function. And that's something I really appreciate.
Thank you, Sherown. I think this really gets a lot at the increased independence that you're all feeling. Maybe just a quick question to end this session, and how has this been impacting the caregivers that surround you? Maybe Jessie?
How has it impacted the caregivers?
Yeah.
I receive a lot less caregiving now because I can just do those small tasks that don't necessarily mean a lot to people that don't have to think about this. There's a big difference from not being able to do a task at all, like tie your shoes, to being able to do that task with patience and care. That is a big difference. That's a hard no to a yes now, and so that has um, it just changes the caregiving game, which is nice for your independence, nice for your mental health sometimes, and it's also really nice on the checkbook for folks that have to pay for caregiving because that really does add up.
Thank you, Jessie. And Sherown?
I've been pretty fortunate to have a good support system and haven't had to rely a lot on caregiving, but I also do have a household with 5 children. So not so much of my independence, but being able to contribute to the daily household chores, being able to cook, clean, pick up, help them tie shoes. If you deal with little kids and arts and crafts and all these little fine motor skills, it's basically OT therapy for me on a constant basis. Being able to do those things around home is really helpful. And then my own independent living, being able to just get ready faster in the morning, being able to get dressed faster in the morning, not needing help in the areas that I need help, whether it's like buttons or zippers or putting deodorant on my left side. I have issues reaching one side over another because the left side's more impaired than the right. Those little things, being able to do them faster and better for myself allows me to contribute and do more things at home.
Thank you so much, Jessie and Sherown. Really appreciate you sharing that information. We're going to move to our next session, which is around the science of all this and how is this actually working to produce these types of results. So maybe we could start with you, Chet. Just high level, how is the REX working?
Happy to, Marco. So the ARC-EX is stimulation applied to the back of the neck over the cervical region of the spinal cord. The way we believe it works is that the electric field activates actually the sensory nerves as they enter the spinal cord. We call those the dorsal roots. Those sensory nerves we know make direct connections to the motor nerves that help cause us to move. Now, the purpose of the ARC-EX isn't to actually cause a muscle to contract, it's to make it much easier for that muscle to contract. So the ARC-EX will run continuously in the background while the user, now we can call them the patient since it's FDA approved, attempts and practices making movements where their brain asks their spinal cord to make the movement. And the stimulator makes it much easier to execute that movement. And with continued therapy, with continued practice, those movements become easier and easier. And you can even do many of those movements without the stimulator active after a period of time.
Thank you, Chet. And Candy, how does this electrical stimulation differ from other types of electrical stimulation that's been explored?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Marco. And most of us, I would assume, are pretty familiar with functional electrical stimulation or neuromuscular electrical stimulation. And essentially, in that type of stimulation, we are putting electrodes over distal muscle groups, usually like in the hands or the legs. So we're putting them directly on those body parts. And then the peripheral nerves that are activated by the current coming through those electrodes are going to cause motor activation, whether or not it's driven by voluntary intent. So for those of you, for all of us probably, who've had some sort of electrical stimulation on, you know that when you turn that stimulator on, if you turn it up high enough, that extremity is going to move, whether or not you are telling it to move. And that's a very different philosophical approach to therapy than what transcutaneous spinal stimulation is. As Chet so articulately stated, it's really a way to enable your normal activation of your nervous system. As you know, our sensory system generally drives motor activation. And so this is just a way to amplify those sensory signals as they're going into the spinal cord, so that when we send a signal down from the brain, it makes it easier to facilitate that motor movement. And so I think the clearest and simplest way to think about it is that spinal stimulation is about movement driven by voluntary intent, whereas other types of electrical stimulation are directly stimulating those motor nerves so that they produce a movement that is not under voluntary intent.
Thanks, Candy. That's a very clear distinction that I think makes this device so exciting, because it's getting at one's volition to make a movement. Chet, I know you gave a high level takeaways from the Uplift trial, the pivotal trial. Maybe if you could just expand a little bit more, and you did mention some things that were a little bit surprising. If you could just remind everyone what happened.
I'd be happy to, Marco. So I think some of the key takeaways from the pivotal trial were that almost everyone responds in some respect to this therapy. Some people respond in the first session. I'd say that's about a third of people. Some people respond after several days or even several weeks. And some people may take longer to respond, and they may not respond in all ways. Perhaps their function doesn't improve, but their strength and their sensation does improve. Their blood pressure, their spasticity might improve. We saw lots of very interesting improvements that didn't happen in everyone, but are very meaningful. Better bladder function for some people, better sleep, things that we've mentioned before. So I think it's really exciting for people to try this therapy with a very open mind, be ready to work hard in the therapy sessions. This is not the infomercial you see on late night TV where you can just fall asleep with a stimulator and wake up with function. You have to actually engage and work hard in the therapy. But when you do, I think most likely, at least 90% of the people we've worked with, will see very meaningful benefits.
Thanks, Chet. Back to you, Candy, on maybe a little more of the details of the participants of the cohort of Uplift, and how many were there, just some basic characteristics, what benefits you were seeing with the different individuals, and any adverse events.
Sure. So as Chet mentioned, we enrolled 65 individuals across 14 sites. And I will say this was in the middle of COVID. And it was, you know, a really amazing opportunity to work with some fantastic sites who are providing spinal cord injury care, and really just some fantastic people who have spinal cord injury who are committed to really finishing this trial and doing a great job with it. So I want to say thank you first and foremost to all of the trial participants and all of the sites who participated. It was really an amazing effort, and onward to pull us all together. It was really just a fantastic opportunity to be involved with it. And honestly, I think, you know, we ended up doing the analysis on 60 individuals. And when you look at how many sites were involved, it was really telling about how motivated, I apologize, people were to finish this study, and the fact that we were able to analyze the data on 60 individuals. So we were looking for individuals with cervical level injury. So those individuals who had impairment likely in their upper extremities and their trunk. and who were willing to commit to a really intensive therapy regimen. We were bringing them in 3 times a week. We were getting as much therapy during the hour of therapy time that we could. We had 8 weeks, an 8-week period in which they were receiving task-specific training alone. So we were not stimulating them at the same time of the task-specific training. And then they received another 8 weeks of therapy in which they were being stimulated at the same time. They were doing those same intensive tasks that Chet again reviewed earlier. And so it was a big commitment for people to participate, and it was really fun to see that people were excited to do this because they were seeing benefit and that they were really following through with the therapy for that long of a therapy paradigm. In terms of the benefits that we saw, I think Sherown and Jessie did such a magnificent job of sharing the benefits that they achieved. So thank you for sharing those. Along with those, we had several people who reported that they were better able to manipulate their catheters when they were doing their bladder care, which is, again, is really important when we think about independence and just care that you want to be able to do on your own. We had one individual who had not been able to manipulate a credit card on his own prior to participating in the study. And afterwards, he was able to use a credit card, go into the grocery store, and felt really confident. One of his goals was to be able to use an ATM machine, and he was able to independently use an ATM machine after the study, which was really exciting for him. Sherown mentioned buttoning shirts. We had lots of people who experienced being able to button their shirts faster and more effective. And then typing, I think, which actually, Sherown, was one of the benefits that you reported. It was being able to type much faster and much more efficiently after the study as well. So I think, and then one benefit that we all enjoyed is one individual who was over 34 years post his injury reported that it was the first time since his injury that he could use a cup to pick up and drink a beer by himself, which was really an important thing for him to gain as well. So I think, all of these priorities are different for each individual, but we saw a variety of benefits across the board for the individuals who participated in this study.
Thank you, Candy. And Chet, Candy did mention a little bit about the protocol. If maybe you can give your thoughts on what's the recommendation for the duration and the frequency of the stimulation, and then maybe we can end this conversation with something pretty much really digging deep into science, and are we seeing neuroplasticity with regards to post-stimulation effects?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be happy to describe the protocol that we've used in all of these research studies. We haven't tested all therapy regimes, but we can tell you that 3 times a week for an hour a day is certainly effective. Most likely 2 days a week could also be effective. We've also worked with some people up to 5 days a week. And while that is effective, I'd say it's maybe a little bit too much. It's good to have a rest day in between your therapy days. I think shooting for 2 to 3 to 4 days per week, about an hour per day of stimulation. Certainly that's the scientific evidence we have. We know that works very well. And the clinicians that will be using these devices in the clinic, in fact, we began to use the device at our Harborview Hospital just yesterday. 4 patients have already received the stimulation in the clinic. And they're beginning with that recommendation, and they're going to need to work with the patient's availability and the clinic availability to find the best duration and frequency that works for everyone. I think I'll send it back to Candy if Candy wants to discuss the duration of stimulation effects.
Sure. And one thing I didn't mention earlier, Marco, that you asked about was adverse events. And I think that was also a really important and positive finding from this study, is that we did not report any or find any serious adverse events that were device related across all 65 participants and across 14 sites. And so when I think as a clinician, as a research clinician, about what that means, it means that hopefully this device can be implemented in a variety of settings in a very safe way. And I think that's all, as we all know, that's very important. In terms of duration of effects, I think this is an area that's ripe for continued research. We don't know exactly how long people will continue to experience the benefits they gain from the study, but I just held a focus group, a qualitative focus group with some of the participants who had participated in the trial, and many of them have reported continued benefits over the last year, over the year after they completed the trial. Maybe they weren't as strong as they initially their benefits, they received significant benefits immediately after the trial, and then over time those benefits aren't quite as strong, but they've still maintained many of those benefits a full year after the trial. So I'm excited about continued research in that area. I think it does tell us that something within the nervous system is changing, and that the nervous system is modifiable even years after injury. And with practice, repetition, and this increased excitability, we can have, it's an exciting time to see how long the duration of these effects can last. And now that these devices are available in the clinic, hopefully we can provide more intensive care that might also see some greater benefits over a longer period of time.
Thank you, Candy. I don't know, Chet, if you have any closing remarks on this.
I just want to share my excitement, and I think the excitement of the research teams that have been involved and the participants that we've been in contact with. I think this is a really pivotal moment for spinal cord injury care to have a device. And again, we don't want to call it neuroplasticity. We don't want to overhype it, but there's something powerful happening here with the stimulator where the benefits certainly outlast the time that the stimulator is running. So this isn't FES. This isn't shocking a muscle, causing it to twitch, and you need the FES machine to get the movement. This is doing something to restore movement that continues to work for at least the days and weeks following the stimulation, maybe, as Candy said, up to at least a year. And so I think that is fundamentally different than the treatments that are out there already.
And I would just add in one more thing. When we did our qualitative focus group a few weeks ago, one of the most heartwarming things that I heard from our participants was one young lady who said when she participated in the study, she was already 3 years post-injury, and it was the period of time in which she felt the strongest and the healthiest throughout her spinal cord injury, throughout the time that she's had a spinal cord injury. And so when Chet and I are very interested in quantifying motor benefits and sensory benefits, but at the end of the day, hearing directly from a participant that she felt stronger and healthier during the time that she was stimulating was also really impactful for me as a researcher and as a clinician.
Well, thank you, Candy, and thank you, Chet, and to all the work that you put in to conduct this really important clinical trial to get FDA approval for ARC-EX. It's very exciting, so thank you. So we're going to move to our last session. This is going to be with Erika and with Dave, and to talk about something that I think is on everyone's minds, and that's access and availability. So maybe, Erika, we can start with you. Maybe just giving some explanation on exactly what this FDA approval really means.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marco. So early in 2024, our team submitted what's called a de novo application to the FDA. And the de novo application is a request for the FDA to review a device for safety and effectiveness, and says that this device really isn't like anything else on the market today. So you have to kind of look at it with that lens. And over the course of the last year, our team has been working super closely with our partners at FDA to go through the clinical evidence that we demonstrated to them with this uplift trial that you've heard a lot about from Dr. Tefertiller and Moritz and Sherown and Jessie as well today. So we presented all of this evidence to FDA, along with a bunch of information about our device and the testing that we've done with the device today. And they look at this and evaluate the risk-benefit ratio, really, of what we've presented. And in the end, they decided that the benefit that they see from the clinical evidence outweighs the risk of the device. And on December 19th, we received a letter from FDA saying that they grant us this application, which means that we are now cleared to market the device in the United States. And this is a lot of work and a lot of partnership, and you see on this webinar how many people have really been involved in getting to this point beyond this group. So it's really an exciting moment for us to now say this device is available for sale in the United States.
Thank you, Erika. We've been getting a lot of questions about who can use ARC-EX. So just getting a better understanding of who can get access to it eventually, and being used for other indications, and are there studies being conducted to kind of expand the use?
Yeah, so our official, I'll just state our official indication for use for clarity. So the ARC-EX indication it's the ARC-EX system is intended to deliver programmed transcutaneous electrical spinal cord stimulation in conjunction with functional task practice in the clinic to improve hand sensation and strength in individuals between 18 and 75 years old that present with a chronic, non-progressive neurological deficit resulting from an incomplete spinal cord injury between C2 and C8. And really the idea here is that folks who meet the exclusion criteria, as well as some of the criteria that Dr. Moritz spoke about earlier today around making sure that a transcutaneous device would be effective for you and safe, folks are eligible to receive this device.
Thanks, Eric. And I don't know if you have the answer to this, but definitely a lot of people are asking how strict is this inclusion and exclusion criteria, and will it change over time potentially?
Yeah, I think for us, we have a certain set of factors that have gone into saying, look, this is what we know today about our device and where it should be used, and who we know will benefit. And as we learn more with use, I think we've seen great evidence in 60 people, and now we have to continue to learn more as this thing is on market. So we'll keep evolving as a company and keep growing with that. So I think for right now, the device will be prescribed in clinic and will be used by healthcare providers, but it's really left to our clinician partners to decide who should be using these devices based on their own clinical expertise.
Thank you, Erica. Just passing it back now to you, Dave. People are chomping on the bit, trying to understand where they can get access to ARC-EX, which clinics will be available. Clinics are also chomping on the bit. People have been asking me, how do I get access to ARC-EX and set it up in their clinical setting? Providing some clarity and a little bit about the path of how this is all going to happen, I think would be very helpful for the community.
With pleasure, Marco, and how great to be on this call, finally. I wanted to thank Jessie and Sherown for generously sharing their personal stories and journeys. And I was so pleased, Candy, that you reminded me that this Uplift study was conducted during COVID. So many companies paused or suspended their studies during that time, or failed to meet their enrollment goals. And it's really a credit to you and Chet and your co-investigators that the study got done, and to the participants, because without that, we wouldn't be here today. And I also want to thank and credit the Reeve Foundation, who invested in this technology, who recognized its promise indeed years ago, and helped to support our path in bringing it forward. So none of this would be possible without you. So thank you. Now, in terms of access, yeah, we want this thing to be available everywhere. Of course, we've put so much work into it. We want it to benefit people around the world in every setting. But we're starting just in the clinic setting. That's where we have the regulatory approval. And we also need some time. We're ramping up our production capacity. We're ramping up our field organization that will be charged with supporting clinics, educating clinics. This is going to take a bit of time. So we've undertaken kind of a limited launch, a conservative launch, starting with 2 or 3 centers in the US, ramping up to 15 or 20 over the course of the next 2 or 3 months. And then we hope to launch it broadly without limitation to US clinics starting in the second quarter of this year. So starting in the April timeframe. In the meantime, we're learning, we're getting better. We feel a real responsibility to make sure that this therapy is introduced well, and the uptake is good, and it works for everyone. So this is a good period of learning and ramping up for us, but certainly, we feel the pressure, and we feel a responsibility to get it out there as quickly as possible.
And are clinics able to reach directly out to you to start to have these conversations of getting access? And I ask because people are already starting to ask us how this will happen.
Indeed, and I don't want them to call your personal cell phone number, Marco. So I think in the chat a couple of times now it's been posted, this web form we call it. So the link that I want you to refer to is this survey.onward.com/support. So this is a web form, and both clinics and individuals who have interest in learning more about the device, staying abreast of developments and deployments and the availability of the device in clinics around the US. This is where you should enter your information, opt into receiving newsletters and other feedback. If you're with a clinic, we're going to contact you right away through our field organization. If you're an individual, you can expect to receive email communications, newsletters. And then eventually what we want to have in place this year is a clinic finder. We want to have an online database available where folks can identify clinics near you where you might be able to engage with the system in which with the therapy.
Thank you, Dave. And again, in the chat, you can see the link to this survey that Dave just mentioned. Candy, we have a question about, will ARC-EX be available for adaptive fitness centers that don't necessarily have physical or occupational therapists, but trainers? Do you have an answer to that question?
I'll hop in and I'll take that one if that's
Oh, I'm
okay.
sorry. That was to you, Erika.
That's good. So right now we're cleared for rehabilitation professional use. So if these centers, these adaptive fitness centers, have somebody who meet the criteria of being a licensed clinician or therapist who defines and or supervises rehabilitation training sessions and or guides the rehabilitation process for a patient, then that's fine. So that is really the scope of who will be prescribing this therapy.
And indeed, Marco, if I may, I just described this kind of limited or controlled introduction. We intend to do that to a mixture of facilities, not just sort of the big name academic research or clinical sites around the world, but other community-based type centers where people are also engaging in rehabilitation and new and emerging technologies like this.
Thank you, Dave. And Erika, could you briefly describe what the process might be for there to be home use of the ARC-EX and not just clinical use?
Yeah, so this year we're working on expanding our label to also include home use. We have some work to do, again, partnering very closely with FDA to get to that point. So more to come on this topic later this year, but no, we are working on it and making sure that the timing of this ties to how we're thinking about getting this into the right hands at the right time when we know that how to make sure this works really well and we can support in the way that it's needed to do this well.
Thank you.
If I may also, Marco, on that, sometimes FDA gets a lot of criticism. I can tell you they have been very supportive of helping us bring this technology to this stage and make it available. Really, really very supportive. So they should get credit for that.
That's great to hear. Dave, a very important question and one that the community is asking a lot about is reimbursement. Maybe just walking through a little bit of how you foresee potential reimbursement of ARC-EX.
Of course. And here I think it's important to delineate reimbursement for clinics versus individuals who might use this in the home setting once we get authorization from FDA for that purpose. Clinics don't need reimbursement to purchase the device. They can purchase it out of their capital equipment funds or from donor funds, and then they can be reimbursed for individual therapy sessions. There are codes for that and codes that allow for assisted sessions where equipment like this is leveraged. So really the question of reimbursement is most salient when you're talking about an individual acquiring the device for use at home. And here it's a bit complicated because different people are covered by different insurance schemes or payers, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurers like United or Cigna or Aetna, the VA, for example, and they all will handle this differently. Fortunately, almost immediately, those who have spinal cord injury who are cared for by the VA system or workers' compensation benefit schemes will have coverage. Will then have to work toward getting coverage from Medicare, Medicaid. Private payers typically follow Medicare, but I think that if we all work together as a community, we can twist some arms and lobby them and get them to support the therapy and reimburse it earlier than is the norm. And so these are among the things that we'll be working on from a market access perspective, so that everyone who thinks they can benefit from the therapy will indeed have access to it.
Thank you, Dave. That's really helpful. And I mean, we're so excited about the technology, so excited about the results of Uplift. I think to really complete all of this is to make sure that people are able to gain access to it from all walks of life. So
yeah, and we can't do that alone. I just want to reiterate,
yes.
these payers, they respond to clinician societies, they respond to patient advocacy groups, they sometimes respond to industry, they respond to media pressure, political pressure. We have to kind of marshal everybody in the community here to make this happen together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. A final question. When is this going to be available beyond the United States?
Yeah. So that's kind of, I'll take that, Erika. But this is also a priority for us. We want to, we've got a few things to get done first. One of which is to make sure that we get home access taken care of in the United States. But we're also very keen to get CE mark, which is kind of the equivalent of FDA clearance in European countries and some of the other geographies. But at this point, we're operating under the assumption that sometime in the second half of this year, we'll have that CE mark and be able to make this technology available in Europe and those jurisdictions that also adhere to or respect CE mark.
Very exciting. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the panel discussion and taking the time to answer these really important questions for the community. I want to thank everybody who joined the webinar. I know a lot of people joined, and that really goes to showing the need of our community in having something that's FDA approved. So we're absolutely thrilled. Again, the links are there in the chat to get more information from Onward Medical, to also participate in that survey to get more info, social media, and again, the Reef Summit, March 10th to the 12th in Denver, Colorado. Thank you, everybody, and very excited to see the ARC-EX.
One more thing, Marco.
Yes,
even though that link, if I may, even though that link says survey, it's not a survey.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a web form where you enter your information, your areas of interest, you opt in to receive additional communication. So that's super important, that link. If you want to stay connected and stay aware, go to that link, which is survey.onward.com.support. Not a survey, though. It's just kind of an entry form with a name that could use a little work. Okay, so that's an improvement opportunity for us. We accept.
Thanks, Dave, for clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thanks.